So I'm going to look at a little bit about what should we be aiming for, how do we know when we get there, how do we keep it going and keep it getting better, and the implications in the context of the NDIS. So one of the things, and the phrase raising our sights comes from a report that Jim Mansell, who Chris just mentioned, had written in the UK about helping us to have higher expectations and to think about those with the most severe disabilities, those with profound and multiple disabilities, and the fact that they could also live good lives in an individualised system. And actually it comes from the fact that everybody can benefit from the right support and from what we call person-centred approaches. Now, some of you will be a bit familiar with this, so I apologise to those of you who probably could stand up and deliver this first bit for me. But effectively, in terms of person-centred approaches in the UK, there are a number of things that people talk about. So the first one, I'll have you laughing in a minute, we'll compete with them in a minute. The first one that we sometimes talk about is person-centred planning. Okay, so and you all, you've some sort of individual planning that's around the individual, their desires and their hopes for the future, and we have a piece of policy in our from our government that says that everybody has to have a person-centred plan. Of course, the majority of people have a piece of paper in the filing cabinet that makes no difference to their lives because they don't have the rest of the package that's needed. The other thing that we have is person-centred thinking. And so we'll find staff teams and people who work with individuals who've been trained in person-centred thinking. And person-centred thinking is important in that it helps to get attitudes right and put the person that staff are supporting at the centre of all activity. Okay, so it sets the context for other things to happen. Person-centred funding, so things like in our system personal budgets and direct payments, are important in that they can give people control, or they're supposed to give people control over who supports them, how, when, and in what activities. So it gives people a lot, it was set up to give people much more control over their support from that. But one of the things that I want to talk to you about is the fact that we know from almost 4 decades that these types of things are not enough to make the difference in outcomes, a difference in the lives of people with intellectual disabilities, in particular those who have more severe or profound disabilities. Okay, person-centred funding, the support individualised, and a piece of paper in the filing cabinet can be important in terms of the whole package, but actually what's needed is something more that we tend to refer to as person-centred action. And this is, as I say, something that's been identified from the late 1960s, early 1970s onwards, in terms of the thing that makes a difference in the lives of people with intellectual disabilities, apart from the level of ability of the individuals themselves. So the skills that people already have is the support that they get from staff or whoever's supporting them in our new system. And the 4 elements that we often refer to in the UK we call active support, and many of you will be very familiar with active support. Good support for communication, so being able to use, and the 2 of those are very closely related. Positive behaviour support, if you're supporting people with challenging behaviour, for example, you may need a behaviour support plan. You may need some additional strategies that help to manage difficult behaviours and make sure that people themselves are safe and the other people around them are safe. And also, with you supporting people with autism, we also use a framework called the SPELL framework to talk about autism-friendly practices. Don't need to go into any of those in substantial detail, but effectively they are ways of working with individuals that are empowering and enabling individuals. And especially designed for people with more severe disabilities and complex needs, but actually we know that they've been used in lots of different scenarios. So, just a question to put to you for a second. What do you think personal budgets are aiming to do? In other words, what do you think are the values behind the NDIS individual funding? Okay. Sorry? Choice and control. Okay, good. Any other values that you think are driving or behind the NDIS? Human rights. Okay. Sorry? Yeah, reduce costs. Okay. That's not so much about what we're aiming to do for the individuals we're supporting, but for the people that are providing the funding. But yes, absolutely, it is. And the cynical, person will probably be saying that's the main reason. Well, the cynical people in the UK say the personal budgets are all about local authorities reducing costs and doing that. Yep.
Can I just add, rather than reducing costs, I think the personal budgets in our context is about cost-effective interventions, that what is being paid for truly makes a difference.
Okay. Well, that's a much better way. That's not the experience in the UK system, where it really is people think we give them a budget because it'll cost less, and therefore we don't need to spend as much money. That's a much better way to think about it in terms of actually it's about cost effectiveness, and that's a much nicer way. Anything else that you think in terms of values, or what individual budgets, personal budgets, whatever you call them, are aiming to do for individuals?
In the Barwon, what's his name scheme, they found out that it cost a whole lot more than they'd expected it to cost, so it was more expensive, not cheaper.
In general, in the UK system, we have found that it is cheaper if you're providing just the support that people need, as opposed to the support that they need and want, but need in particular. Okay. All right. Let's move on and think about, well, what in terms of things like the values, because the core thing that we need to consider is if we're putting into action the values that are behind individual funding, or any other system of values, then you have to say, well, what would we see? How would we know when we've got there? Okay. Nobody mentioned social inclusion. Okay, about really living in the community, being part of the community, and that was a big theme that came up earlier on, the issue of inclusion, and that might be something, that's certainly something that in our policy system that our government want services of any type to do, is to try and improve people's social inclusion. Growing in independence, developing new skills. Okay, might be something that we're thinking about, and also choice and having real choice and control. And as we say, personal budgets, the first thing people think about is choice and control. That's what it's meant to do. But you've got to ask the question, well, how would we know if some of these things are in place? Okay, what would we see? Well, if people were really included in society, we'd see them taking part in ordinary activities everywhere with other people. They wouldn't just be doing special activities. Nothing wrong with special activities, but if that's all you do in your life, then actually you can't really argue terribly much that people are included in their local community and in their society. In terms of growing in skills or improving independence, actually, the way that people get there, what we would see is people trying new things, doing things. Okay, but with just enough help and support to experience success. We all need help and support when we do something new, don't we? When we try a new thing. Okay, anybody who's never been here before, okay, would have accessed a reasonable amount of help and support to get here. What type of help and support did you have to find your way here this morning?
Google Maps.
Google Maps, okay. Anything else?
Reception.
The reception, giving directions, phoning up. Okay, good. Experience. So you have experience of being here before, so therefore you were able to draw on that. That's a really good point. Anybody use a sat-nav? No, we don't have sat-navs in Australia, do we not? Oh. Sat-navs are not a good idea, because sat-navs take away all your ability to learn new skills. Well, actually, what they do is reduce your stress. Sat-navs are good for reducing stress, but actually they teach you to be completely prompt dependent and not to pay attention to anything around you like landmarks, etc. Okay, we don't want support for people to be like a sat-nav. Turn right, turn left. Yeah? What actually is a much better way of doing it is to find a way that enables the person to do as much as possible themselves. The more help you give, the less independent people become. Okay. And then thirdly, how would we know if people were experiencing real choice and control? Well, we'd see people trying new things. We don't learn anything new if we never do anything new. And you would also see people having their decisions respected. Okay, and this is important in a supported decision-making context as well. So we'd see people making decisions that were respected. Now, obviously, there is a duty of care, and so sometimes people might make choices that we can't respect there and then, like sitting down in the middle of the main road. But there's lots of things in people's lives where we can allow, and I've used that on purpose, allow people, where we can give people the opportunity, support people to make choices, from what they want to drink in the morning, without making assumptions, through to where they want to live, who they want to live with, if we support it in the right way. Okay. So, key thing here is that any of these things, any of these values, need people to be doing things, to be experiencing things. Okay, we're most likely to make choices about something if we've had some experience of those things that we're making choices. You need some options, and you need some experience of those options, and you need some way of communicating your choice. Okay. We use the phrase engagement in meaningful activities and relationships, and it's important because it's both an indicator of quality of life and a means to achieving quality of life outcomes. Of course, it's not the only indicator, but especially for people with severe and profound disabilities, it's a really, really good indicator of what life is like for them. Why? Well, because there's a number of reasons with a really good research evidence base. The first thing is that actually activity is good for us. Activity is good for us. Inactivity withers the body and the mind. Long periods of inactivity result in have implications for our physical well-being and our mental well-being. Okay. Overt evidence of adjustment and happiness. What does that mean? Well, there's two sides to that. Usually people like being engaged. Once they've had the chance to have a little try, we usually find that people like it. But the other thing is that if people are choosing to be engaged and to do things, then we're doing something right in terms of our support. If people say yes when we offer them something, when we support them to do something, then we're doing something right. We're offering in the right way, we're supporting in the right way, we're communicating in the right way. So it's a sign that we're giving good support if people are happy in their lives and engaging in things, trying things with us. It's a sign that they trust us in our support. As we said a minute ago, experience underpins development. None of us learned to get dressed in the morning, I imagine, with your parents giving you a book when you were 2.5 years of age and saying, here, read this and get dressed. How did you get dressed in the morning? What did you do? Any of his children, how have they learned to get dressed? Have some help. And what happens to that help over time? It decreases as they become more and more independent in the activity. Now, for some people, they will not be able to, they not become completely independent within activities, but actually many people can do little bit more of many of the things that they get involved in life. Okay. And of course, lifestyle or quality of life is the outcome. You know, it's pretty hard to achieve any of these things if you're sitting in a chair staring at the wall. You have to be engaged in things to experience social inclusion. You have to be out there doing things in the community with other people. Being pushed around in your wheelchair doesn't do it really for social inclusion. For physical well-being, we've already mentioned. Emotional well-being, feeling good about yourself, feeling as if you've got some value, self-worth, self-confidence. All of those things come from doing things with the right help and support to experience success. Okay. Even rights. Exercising your rights to be part of your society, to contribute to society, to be a citizen. If you've got a severe and profound intellectual disability, it's actually the only way to do that is with help. But you can do it. So engagement is about doing constructive things with materials. It can be interacting with people, talking, watching, listening, showing. For example, all of you are engaged at the minute. I don't see anybody nodding off just yet. That will come after lunch probably. But you're listening, you're reading, some of you are writing. You're all doing a whole range of different types of engagement. I don't see any challenging behaviour starting to emerge. Or even self-stimulatory behaviour, actually. We haven't got too much of pen chewing and finger flapping and twirling hairs or anything like that just yet. That will come probably later on in the day. But even things like, we had the example of football from Tim, even things like taking part in a group activity, such as playing football. Even if it's obviously much nicer if you do get to kick the ball, but actually even if you never touch the ball, but you are running, you're running after it, you're watching, you're going, me, over here. You're engaged in playing the game of football. And even if you don't understand all the rules, it doesn't matter. Even if you don't understand why you have to do something, that doesn't matter. If you're doing it, you're engaged. The example we gave on some of our videos is that I once witnessed a member of staff who was going to just water plants with an individual. They were supporting them to water the house plants, and they started to explain photosynthesis to them before they water the plants. It's like, not necessary. Some people might be interested, of course, and you respond to the individuals. But the majority of people don't need to understand photosynthesis in order to hold the watering can and tip it. Okay, so the engagement is about the actual taking part in things, whether it's an interaction aimed at you or whether it is an activity in a group or something with your hands, where your hands are on materials, effectively. But just some examples of engagement. And this is really important in the context of the NDIS, in that engagement is a whole range of things. It's not just about, and some people make a mistake and think, well, it's about doing chores around the house. It's only about doing your cooking and your ironing, but it can be anything. It can be a job, it can be just talking to the neighbours, handing over the money to the shopkeeper, taking the newspaper from the shopkeeper in the shop. All of those things are examples of engagement. So it crosses every aspect of your life to be engaged. You and I spend at least 90% of our time engaged in meaningful activity. Okay? And I challenge you to think about when was the last time you sat and literally stared at a wall or at the TV without turning it on. Can you think of the last time you did that? Usually it happens to us when we are so exhausted that we cannot physically get off the sofa to reach for the remote control to turn it on. Because we've had such a busy day that we're just exhausted. Okay. People with intellectual disabilities, research tells us that the average time spent engaged is about 40% of the time, between 40 and 50%. Those who are more able tend to engage more, but I have lots of research showing people with severe intellectual disabilities, and even some people with mild intellectual disabilities, engage less than 5% of the time. That's less than a minute in every hour. They actually do something meaningful. And that's quite scary, and that's why this stuff is important, because actually this doesn't depend on where you live. This depends on what staff do with you, or whoever's supporting do with you. If they do everything for you, you don't get any of these benefits. Okay, and this is what's important.
People can be supported to be involved in their own personal care, and the tasks that are often seen as staff tasks, such as testing fire alarms or measuring water temperatures, in jobs and volunteering in their local community, or simple things like helping out their neighbours by putting out their bins on bin day when they're not feeling well. It also involves social activities such as talking or listening to someone talking to you, showing someone something, shaking hands, waving. It can also involve taking part in leisure activity or sports. The main aim is to help people to access all of the opportunities available in their home and the community.
Thank you.
So just a few examples of the sort of things that we look for when we're thinking about how good are people's lives. You know, are they out there in the community? Are they engaging with people? Are people talking to them? Are they doing meaningful things in terms of, so you saw a couple of people there with little jobs, delivering leaflets, delivering newspapers, for example, through to things like washing up, cooking, preparing things around the house, and even things like trampolining, and leisure activities all come into that mix of what makes our lives. And I imagine you and I would like a little bit more leisure in our lives. Am I right? I imagine most of your lives are probably quite work-filled, and maybe some of you have got families, so the rest of it is kind of doing things for the family and or looking after the house, perhaps. And most of us, I imagine, would like a little bit more time and leisure. But actually, if we spent all our time in leisure, life would be a wee bit boring, I imagine. Yeah, so it's about a balance, isn't it, across different areas of life. And the contrast to this is obviously disengagement, and I imagine most of you can imagine what this might look like. Now, I wonder if the video will start if I press, oh no, it won't. And it was filmed in an old institution. The institution has closed a long time ago. But it doesn't really make you want to be there, does it? Except to maybe get them out. It doesn't make you want to go and interact. Oh, so I can turn the volume down a little bit now. So the vocal doesn't matter. But the clip here, there's 3 of the gentlemen that were in that institutional ward in a very nice, well, nice in the 1980s, early 1990s in terms of carpet and decor, small group home, just 3 people. And they're doing no more in terms of their engagement than they had been in an institution. And this member of staff here, when you talk to her, she really believed that this gentleman was washing the dishes with her. Really, really believed it. Okay? Because he was in the kitchen. Well, he's watching me, isn't it? He's taking part in the activity because he's watching. But that's not engagement. And the key here is whose hands are in the rubber gloves? Whose hands are on the materials? He's not got his hands on the materials. Yeah? And so here it's a case of disengagement. Not actually. And eavesdropping and observing other people doing things is not engagement. It might be the first step to getting somebody even thinking, somebody who's had a long history of not doing anything, thinking about it, but actually it's not the key. It's not an example of engagement. And you can see here, just sitting in the car, being driven, rocking, finger flicking, doing those types of things, just sitting, waiting, or pacing up and down the corridor, would not be things that we would count in as engagement and meaningful activities, as something that improves people's quality of life. Some people might need time to pace. They might need time to flap, if they're anxious people or people with autism. But the point at which they're doing that is not something that's going to improve their quality of life. Okay, so the important thing is to look at, well, how much of their time are they spending engaged in activities, for example? And of course, engagement can be the whole thing, or it can be part of an activity, interaction or task. People can go all the way through, or they can stop, start, dip in and out, do a little bit now and a little bit later. Who says cleaning the bathroom has to all be done in one go? Who says that we can't wash the sink now, the shower tomorrow, clean the toilet the next day, and the floor the day after, providing, of course, that there hasn't been an accident or something hasn't been spilt, in which case, yes, you have to do that. But how many of you clean your bathroom every day from top to bottom? Okay, there's usually one in the room. But actually you don't, do you? And is there a law? Is there a standard that says bathrooms must be cleaned every day? No. They say they must be hygienic and they should be, they're expected to be clean, but that doesn't mean that you spend all day cleaning it. So it's perfectly okay to break things up into what is manageable for individuals. But we're talking here about people with severe and profound intellectual disabilities. And even those who are more able, for the first time we do stuff, we need some help. Yeah? But with enough help, everyone can take part in meaningful activities and relationships. Everyone can contribute at least to some extent, even if they don't have all the skills needed. We can find things that people can take part in. It might be the tiniest thing to start with, and maybe over time become much more. It might be primarily a social interaction, not necessarily involving language, but a social interaction over something really small. Yeah? Staff might be doing something, I don't know, testing the fire alarms or doing paperwork in the office, and they do little bits with the individual, but they also have a nice social interaction with them. So social interaction is important, but not if that's the only thing you do, if you sit and listen to other people talking. Okay. And everyone can choose preferred activities and increase their control over the environment. We spent Wednesday talking about supported decision making in Melbourne. Okay, and Tim mentioned it a couple of times earlier. We know that even those with the most profound disabilities can make choices if we find the right way to offer the choice and to listen. And I don't necessarily mean listen to them speak. Listen with your eyes is what you'll do more of. Watching behaviour, looking at reactions, getting to know their communication level. But everybody can make choices. What should you see? Well, actually, you should see staff doing a range of rather skilled things. Okay, some staff we come across, and family members and aunts and uncles, do this naturally. They support in this way naturally, but the majority of people we work with don't. There is a change of mindset needed, and even when you have a change of mindset, you have to have certain skills to work with this particular more severely disabled group of people if they're going to be enabled and empowered. Okay. However, that doesn't mean that they have to have qualifications. What's most important, that they have the right outlook and attitudes and values, and they think it's worth working with the individual, and they really want to do it, and then we can give them the skills. Okay, and I think that's really, really important. But these are just the four principles of active support, and they drive lots of the work that we do in the UK, and actually that we've been doing in the UK here, in Australia here, with regards to a more group home type settings. But in the UK, this is used in supported living settings where staff are being, people buy, if you like, the time of staff from an agency or an organisation. Good people, staff will be trained to enable and empower individuals, not to do everything for them. Okay, because it doesn't come naturally for many staff to do everybody. The majority of staff automatically veer towards caring for. Yeah, and doing for people. And actually, I mean, over time, hopefully that will change, because society's values will change about the things that people can do, the expectations we have. But quite often people need some additional training and help to be able to work in this way. Okay.
The next clip is also a clip of people cooking, but this time it is 3 people who have much more severe intellectual and physical disabilities. And we've got one member of staff who starts off supporting 2 people, and at some points he supports a 3rd person, and then a second member of staff does a little bit as well. But together they're supporting a number of people to cook the evening meal.
There, well done. What we'll do is, Joe, we'll have some mushrooms in as well, so you can help us cut some mushrooms. And Michael, you can cut some mushrooms as well. You want mushrooms in, Michael? Yeah. Right, I'll cut some with Joe first, Michael, and you can do some. With a nice sharp knife. Go ahead, Joe. There, Joe. Right, one at a time, nice and slow. Without my finger. That's it. Just wait, Joe. That's it. Go on then, Joe. Excellent. One more. Right, put the knife down, Joe. You put these in the pan for us. And put them mushrooms in the pan, Joe. Keep these. Which hand do you hold the knife with? Right, I'll help you, guide you a little bit. That's it. We'll go that way. Lovely. We'll go that way again. I'll cut that one a little bit smaller. You can cut that one there yourself. That's it. One more. And that one. Excellent. Right, give me that knife, mate. You put them in the pan for us. And I'll go and get Vince and he can come in and he can set the table.
This way. And what we know from many years of experience and research from working with, I have worked with staff in probably 25 organisations now in the UK and in Australia to look at and to help them implement this way of working with people and thinking about engagement as a key outcome for people. And we know that certain things are needed. We know that whoever's supporting individuals need to know what they're doing, in the sense of if they're supporting more than one person at a time, or if there's more than one member of staff supporting an individual, which you may well have, especially if you're supporting with people with more complex needs, then there has to be some form of organisation. People need to know what they're doing, what's happening, and that's quite important. Absolutely critical appears to be whether the frontline managers, whatever they're called, so it might be a team leader, it might be a house supervisor, it might be home manager, service manager, whatever they're called, the frontline manager needs to be a practice leader. I'll come back to the NDIS system in a minute. We know that training and support for both staff and managers, the frontline leaders, is really important. And the training has to involve not just classroom-based type or online training, but it must include hands-on training, in situ training, to help people to work and to skill themselves up in this way. We know that it needs a supportive motivational context or a culture. So just having training is not enough. It has to be what is expected of you. It has to be what you think you want, that managers, for example, want you to do, okay, in the context of the research that has been done. And we know that it's really important that ongoing monitoring and review is based on observation of what goes on in practice, not just on pieces of paper, recordings, etc. Okay. We actually know from some more recent research in the UK that if services are already relatively well resourced, and this does not mean one-to-one support for everybody in a team or in a setting, that if they have enough support to meet their needs, then actually it doesn't cost any more money to do things well than it does to do things badly. Because it's not about how many staff you have, which is the main cost in any, whether it's a personal budget system or whether it's a group home setting, it doesn't, actually it's about how staff work that makes a difference to people's outcomes. Okay. And this will be just as important to think about in a system, and actually harder to maintain to some extent, in a system of individual budget. And we know that it's absolutely critical for those with the most complex needs if they're to have any sort of quality of life. Okay. Now I think Bev probably mentioned last month to you a little bit about practice leadership. And actually we've done some research around the importance of practice leadership. And it has to actually be in the context of generally good management. So it's part of frontline management, being able to lead the practice of the staff team. Okay. Elements of active support of practice leadership are things like being able to provide the organisation, coaching, reviewing support with individual and the skills of staff and of the team, and it's part of being a good frontline manager. Practice leaders need to be able to do what they want staff to do better than staff already do it. In other words, they have to be able to lead practice. They have to be able to show staff, coach staff. They need to feel confident when they're working with staff. But they also must be able to deal with difficult staff. They have to have the skills to know what to do when people won't do what they want them to do. Chris mentioned Jim's example. In America, people just appeared to do what they were told. And in the UK and here, that's not necessarily the case from that. I'm going to skip this one. And in terms of monitoring, well, we usually say that you need the least amount of paperwork possible, only what's necessary to be able to review meaningfully what's happening and to see what the quality of life is like. It really needs to be based on observation. It needs to look at what are people's lives like. It's not ideally done by frontline staff, or whoever, in whatever context, the supporter is not the person who monitors quality. It's not done by the frontline leader often, although there's an element, obviously, of practice leadership that is around observing and giving feedback. That's about shaping up practice. Okay. It doesn't have to be very frequent, and it should definitely tie in with any other process, audit processes, person-centred planning reviews, review of care packages, should be systems that can already be used in a different way to check out what life is like for this group of people. Some organisations find it helpful to have external ways of checking how things are going on. Others train up people internally to look for the right things and to be able to do this. Okay. Now the challenge of monitoring and improving practice with personal budgets is obviously it's much easier to provide practice leadership if you're situated in the house, in a group home setting. But it's perfectly possible to do it in a whole range of other settings. For example, some of our organisations in the UK, so if for example they are providing a support service to people living in their own home, which is bought by their personal budget or whatever other way that they've used to buy it, then they will always have a team leader for the team of staff who are going out to people's homes in that area. Okay, and every now and again, the team leader will go and shadow a member of staff. Okay, and even if staff are supporting more than one person in lots of different settings, as will be in more rural areas, it is still possible to have team meetings. Actually, the IT here, Skype or whatever, is quite good if you've got people to all come together to think about what's going well, what might need to change, etc. And in our experience, usually what people say, but people don't want you in their house. They don't like it when you come and invade to observe. It's not true. If you watch the video, if you see some of the video clips that I've shown, this from a training DVD, actually, we have a lovely collage at the end that shows just how much people enjoyed having the camera in their face, the whole film crew, and quite often 3 or 4 other people who wanted to be there because the filming was going on and to make sure it was done properly. So we had one man with very severe challenging behaviour and autism who lives on his own. He has an individualised service, 2-to-1 staff support, who had the cameraman, the camera, one of the practice, Bev Ashman's, one of her counterparts, John Ockenden, his mother, the 2 members of staff and the manager were all in the service for most of the day. The guy had an epileptic fit in the morning, so he was a wee bit dozy, and he managed to cope all day and still had time to smile at the cameraman later in the day. Yeah? We have to, obviously there will be individual differences, but in general, people actually like it when you come to visit. Even if you spend an hour sitting actually just watching what's going on, that's okay. Yeah? So actually there are lots of ways to do that. And we certainly have found that there's lots of different ways, if you're creative and flexible, of being able to provide that practice leadership, of being able to provide training and support, like Tim said, even in rural communities. It does require some infrastructure. It's obviously easier when staff are grouped together, but that's not going to happen in a system necessarily of individual budget. And circles of support, funders, commissioners of services should have a focus on outcomes for people, and those with more severe disabilities, this should include at least some observation as part of any review process. Okay, thank you.